Okay. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the. Let me just briefly make it so I can see the screen. Okay. Welcome to the kind of the breakout call. The idea is to basically talk a little about kind of our general thoughts on the topic of EVM equivalence in particular, and that's kind of a big part of what we've been thinking about from the roll call side, the motivation behind roll call to begin with, and how we basically see the path forward. Um, so yeah, I want to basically split it up into kind of chronologically, kind of first talk a little bit about like how we got to the current situation, um, and then a little bit about our vision forward and specific next steps. A few quick disclaimers, just to mention it. So all of this is just our perspective, right? So if I'm ever sloppy in like wording it a little bit too definitive, really this is all just about kind of how we see things, and we would love to kind of get feedback. And obviously, there's in the second half of the call, there's going to be like an open discussion section. But yeah, it's really just kind of like our view on things. Our here also very explicitly being just like Carl, Yoff, and me, and not representing anyone else, not DF, not any other larger group. Carl and I in particular have been kind of had been kind of thinking about this for a long time, and then Yoff kind of specifically had very similar thoughts, and so we kind of aligned on this record thing, but it's really just us. Um, and then specifically on the scope as well, here specifically we're talking about the EVM and execution broadly. Like I'll use the term EVM, but what I mean with that for the call is really more like anything kind of execution related, but specifically not touched by that are like there are two specific concerns or interoperability standards, this kind of thing. And then also last disclaimer from my side, my apologies. This presentation won't have many graphics or anything. It's a little bit text based, but if you keep the attention up, it's hopefully going to be interesting. Um, and then just to get it out of the way, we have an announcement, and I don't want to basically throw that on you like halfway through the presentation, so I want to mention it now already briefly. And there's a new team, a new client team, specifically called Rollup Geth, which will maintain a fork of Geth that is more specifically aimed towards the L2 setting. It's a team within Nethermind. I'll talk a little bit more throughout the presentation of like what the specific vision for them is, but I wanted to basically already start with the announcement itself to get it out of the way. Yeah, and also by the way, if you, I think actually it's best if we do questions maybe at the end of the presentation. Okay, so quick history, like how did you get here? So basically three sections. First, the EVM itself, and then I want to talk a little about the L2 side and the client side. So on the EVM itself, right? Before kind of like the beacon chain launch, there were all these ideas for like a more comprehensive kind of like ETH2 setting, including execution sharding and all these things. And the idea back then was to basically have ETH1 basically just retire, and specifically also like the EVM tied to that, kind of more or less retired, and have ETH2 launch with new execution environments and basically overall overhauled execution. And that all only changed with the kind of the pivot to the rollup centric roadmap, roughly, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago. Where basically people where the idea was basically, hey, we already have an execution chain, it's good enough for the settlement requirements that you need from a base chain in a rollup centric world. Let's just reuse it. And so that's how kind of the idea of the merge came to be, but implicitly with that also basically came like a basically giving up on these, at least on the L1 side, on this kind of this work. We had the EWASM team that then and now it's called the Epsilon team that's now then end up focusing on other things, but basically we stopped working on like the next generation of kind of execution. And not only that, but also like since the merge, basically on the we've really kind of like slowed down progress specifically on new EL-centric features. It doesn't mean the execution layer on Ethereum doesn't ship things anymore, but the things that we ship are mostly focused on like execution layer, consensus layer, interoperability, and these kind of things, and not so much anymore like actual execution improvements. And for example, I just mentioned here like two specific features that I worked on in the past. For example, where we for a while kept going on this research on more advanced execution, things like state expiry, native account abstraction. We also did like ERP 3074. All of these basically just ended up in this category of, hey, those are nice features, and in a more kind of like high throughput or otherwise more ambitious EVM chain, we would probably ship them, but basically on the L1, at least for this moment, we don't see a need for them anymore. So really the L1 EVM has been kind of ossifying quite rapidly. So now, why is that relevant in the L2 context? Of course, that's kind of the topic of EVM equivalence. So how did we get there for the L2s? Well, from basically the L1 point of view, the initial expectation was that L2s basically would all focus on experimentation with novel execution environments, basically take off where ETH2 left things. But it turned out, I mean, of course, there have been, especially like also in the first wave of rollups, there were a few experiments like that, but it became very obvious very clearly that basically while Ethereum as a whole could have with some effort pivoted or like iterated to a new execution system, any individual like L2, especially one that only just now got started, just didn't have the network effect, the kind of the weight to actually get anyone to care or support any kind of novel features. And so really kind of the only choice was to stay for many L2s was to go with EVM equivalents and basically just make sure that you have feature parity with the L1, because that's the only way to really make it convenient for users and developers to onboard. Since then, of course, we've seen a lot of L2 innovation. I mean, it's been really quite the success story. It's been amazing. But on the L2 side, that has really kind of like mostly avoided this specific topic or this specific area and for the same reasons. So L2s have heavily innovated on like most L2 specific functionality, and on the EVM side on things like EVM extensions, things like stylus, just to name an example, right? But not really kind of the core execution system itself so much. And then the third part of the history that I want to briefly touch on is kind of the client picture. So historically for the L2s, that has been very heavily dominated by Geth, and that was just for kind of obvious reasons. By the time that most L2s got started, Geth was kind of the strong L1 majority client, kind of the obvious choice, very stable. It made sense, and so ended up as kind of chosen as the primary client by most L2s. But actually, yeah, it turns out this is not necessarily an ideal fit, specifically because the Geth team is very opinionated about wanting their primary and more or less sole focus to remain on the L1. And so basically they just aren't usually willing to implement or support any kind of features that are only relevant in the L2 context. And so basically the client as a whole is very much basically still L1 centric to this day. So that's kind of like the three history pieces. So basically the EVM as a whole kind of ossifying, but at the same time being the kind of the shared target across at least the L2 equivalent, the EVM equivalent part of the L2 ecosystem, and then Geth itself also as the main client, not particularly L2 focused. And so that gets us kind of to today. I would say that what I just described was more like the situation, say, as of the beginning of the year, kind of like covering the first few years of the rollup-centric roadmap. Since then, things have started to shift a little bit, and in particular, but many things also are still kind of in a similar spot. So On the L1, we continue to basically only ship new EL features with relatively low frequency. There are a few now, though, that are basically in the pipeline that I would call a little bit bigger changes again. But there I would also say that even there, it's not an ideal fit for this kind of tight coupling of L1 and L2 specifically, because when we ship those on the L1, they're always very specifically kind of like tailored around what we need out of them on L1. I picked kind of 3 examples of like the 3 main kind of bigger upcoming L-side changes that I see. And I think they might also cover the next 3 hard forks, basically. And I would say that the first one, 7702, might be the one that's the most kind of also reusable on the L2 side. But of course, again, there also still was very much centered around the fact that on L1, the vast majority of users still use EOAs, which might not be true, at least on many of the L2s. And then a little bit later down the timeline, we have EOF, which I personally am quite hopeful for also in the L2 context. But for example, we've already heard feedback from some of the L2s, especially on the ZK side, that are quite worried about the implications of EOF. And again, point being here, not that it's not an amazing features for L2s. It's just that basically L2 compatibility, or say ZK compatibility, was not a primary design concern. And so now it potentially causes issues. And I think even better examples of that is Verkle, where we've had kind of RollCall conversations in the past about will L2s want to move over to Verkle as well once L1 does, and that situation is very, very unclear. And again, one more of these features that changes the EVM, but changes the EVM based on what L1 specifically needs. Now, if we kind of look at the situation with EVM equivalents, there definitely is still this lock-in effect. And in particular, I just wanted to briefly kind of categorize the ways in which I think this specifically really leads to a mismatch of kind of priorities. Or like not priorities, but basically just like a mismatch in setting and kind of differences in what would be optimal for each layer. And in particular, the 4 that I think are dominating here are, I mean, for one, just like the long-term throughput levels. I think many L2s really would, in principle, want their chains to go to, just to basically gigagas levels, or something on that order at least. L1 definitely does not have equivalent ambitions, and that partially, or like to a very big part, is also kind of driven by the fact that the full node requirements, frankly, are just very different, right? Like L1 needs to basically be able to run on more or less on a Raspberry Pi, or at least some similar machine. And that then, I mean, that's the whole point of kind of the rollup-centric roadmap, the execution compression that specifically gives us the trustlessness on the L2 that then enables the L2s to have, say, even if you go to the extreme, you could have an L2 where in order to run a full node, you need to basically be in a data center, and that would still, of course, now you have to answer some other questions around how can users basically then specifically kind of get assurances, but in principle you could have a setup like that that's still safe, but that only works because the L1 runs on such a diverse node set. But of course, what kind of EVM you run optimally would be different in these settings. And then there is kind of the topic of block building, and in L1, of course, we have this this rotation every 12 seconds, different block producer. It's a very specific, very opinionated setup, which just frankly, obviously, is already not how L2s do today. But again, it's basically a lot of these assumptions are kind of baked into the EVM at the base layer. And then last point, of course, that's a very big one and very obvious one. Is a subset of the L2 space, and of course a growing subset over time, probably like all of it, is ZK based, and that brings its own kind of set of requirements, ways in which the EVM is very much not optimal there, and things that would be done differently if one were to tailor the VM around that. And then as a last point, I just want to mention, it's not all just the differences in settings. There's actually one more factor, or like that I see, that also really kind of drives the there's kind of this tension between the kind of L1 needs and L2 needs, and that is just that like L1 by its very nature is extremely conservative, right? We very much never want to kind of to do ship change features that not just break the L1, but even just like put us in a position where we are not 100% comfortable having covered all the edge cases and everything. It leads to very slow moving L1, and that's just like and not quite the same kind of level of willingness of risk tolerance that we see in the L2 space. And then on the client side, they actually I would say it's the part of the picture where where we have seen the most kind of improvements recently, and that's been primarily driven by Reth, which basically as a new major kind of L1 client came in and started to be more explicitly L2 focused. We've also more recently seen other L1 clients as well kind of express more explicit interest in kind of like supporting L2s. So we now have like basically a broader base of clients and clients that are basically natively focused on the space. But for now, at least, most L2s are still based on Geth and don't have immediate kind of plans to either kind of add support for other clients or even like deprecating Geth support. And in particular, what we've heard, even from those that are looking into kind of support for a new client, a lot of them have expressed strong. I guess I can say a lot of you, a lot of you have kind of expressed, in principle, interest in basically even if you were to move to a client that's more like focus on the needs of L2s, that you'd prefer to still then in that world be multi-client, and so have a way to keep Geth support. Yeah, and that's basically kind of the picture of how we see the situation today. Those are kind of the dimensions that I think are relevant regarding the kind of the situation of the EVM, and that's kind of the basis for how we kind of made our plans, or like kind of have our perspective of what to do, how to unlock L2s here in some sense. So that's kind of the next section. And just to now basically go back to the initial announcement, specifically kind of roll up Geth and start there, right? Like start basically on the client picture side. So as I was saying, like a lot of the L2 ecosystem is still based on Geth. The idea here, and it's basically to got this set up and started, was basically a collaboration between the Nethermind organization and kind of us from the RollCall side. So the idea is to basically have a long-standing, long-lasting kind of L2 focused fork of Geth. Nethermind seemed like an ideal fit. Basically, because of their own client, they have a lot of kind of strong experience around the EVM, and have already worked in the past with L2s, have some view on these things as well, and so really seem like an ideal partner there. And basically they will kind of host this team going forward. Also, after the presentation, we have some of them on the call here as well. So they'll kind of briefly introduce themselves afterwards as well. The idea really is to basically have a client, have this client or like this fork have a collaborative relationship with Geth. We already kind of have talked with Marius, for example. I'm not sure actually. I can't see right now the participants list if Marius is on the call as well. But basically, we've already talked with Marius, and had in principle kind of got the feedback that Geth actually would appreciate, right? Like basically having kind of that their version of focus basically taken away from them. There would be one streamlined team that they can basically interact with, have talk about upstreaming features, these kind of things, but basically have this connective tissue between them and the L2s. And then of course the idea would be that this could then basically become a basis to support more L2 specific functionality, and that can be. Someone's unmuted. Okay. yeah, so basically that would cover both just like convenience functionality, more tailored around what L2s would need out of a client, and then of course also going forward, basically L2 specific features, IPs, these kind of things. But of course, I want to stress there just that like all of that will very much then be opt-in. So if you basically think this is interesting, you would like to have a client team you can talk to, but you're not sure yet whether you'd actually want to ever move beyond the scope of L1 in terms of feature set, that would not basically that would be a separate question, right? So that's not a it doesn't come, this client doesn't come with a commitment to some sort of new feature set. Yeah, and in particular, I would want to talk about that point a little bit more. So basically, the hope would be that this way we can establish a kind of like a basis with across the L2 ecosystem of basically several of like a set of L2 native clients, and that way we can really basically we then have a kind of practical path to get around to actually shipping some more advanced IPs. In the past, we basically when we launched RollCall, we already were thinking that probably until we figured something like this out, we'd mostly be blocked from actually doing meaningful things. And indeed, if you've attended any of the kind of the last months of RollCall, it was quite obvious that, well, there were quite a few interesting kind of IPs presented by different teams that had interesting ideas. Most of that is blocked by the fact that most L2s just have clients that have a client that would not implement and maintain a feature that's only relevant in the L2 context. And so if everyone has to in their own kind of branch, in their own fork of Geth, maintain a feature that's basically a non-starter. So up to this point, we haven't really been able to support kind of shipping any IPs. But the one caveat here, and I'll get back to this right on the next slide, but basically on its own, this of course does not change that specs wise, there's still the same kind of forcing function of the kind of L1 EVM equivalents, where basically just because now we on the client side have this unlock and can basically start looking into more advanced features. On its own, this would only be a good fit for like say isolated small features like precompiles, these kind of things, and then more like under the hood features that might make bigger changes, but in a way that's not exposed to dApps or users directly, because that way you could still kind of remain a one EVM equivalent, but and this is basically the second part of our vision. We have thoughts on this as well, because we really think for the reasons kind of that I outlined, we really think that kind of this continued L1 EVM equivalence is not the right path forward for the L2 ecosystem. This again is just our perspective, but so basically what we're proposing here in addition. So basically the rollup Geth team will get started. It's already set up. So they'll be around no matter what. But like this part is more opt-in. This part here, the L2 EVM Common Core that I like to call it. I personally am very excited about this. I think it's really would really be a crucial building block for bringing EVM innovation back to the L2s. But this part is opt-in. If you don't think this makes sense, then by all means, right. The idea here is that basically we think it would make a lot of sense to basically have some sort of shared set of IPs or otherwise kind of EVM changes that everyone who wants to opt into this common core would commit to supporting, right? So basically, you have some sort of shared base, sort of shared extension of the L1 EVM, and that way, basically, you could really think of it, right? Like it basically gets you the best of both worlds. You still are equivalent with everyone else. It's just that everyone else is also now equivalent with you and your kind of enhanced feature set, no longer with the L1, right? So basically, we are. The idea would be to really create basically a L2 EVM, which is basically a superset. I mean, of course, over time there might also be some changes from the breaking changes from the L1 EVM, but basically, like it's mostly, you can mostly think of it as a superset of features from mainnet, that becomes the de facto kind of new basis for on the L2 side. And so that means that like because of the combined weight of the participants, it would become the primary kind of target for wallets, for tooling, for things like Solidity, basically everything in the ecosystem, which would really kind of take away these concerns around the inability to make changes, because now we would have the basis for that. One aspect of that is also would be that then that would be a good platform to kind of harmonize the way to how to handle these upcoming L1 changes that I mentioned. For example, Verkle, that would be a group where we could where these decisions could be made. And just to kind of like give a little bit of an intuition of like how we think about this, or like would think about this, the idea here would be to have basically the best of both worlds, right? Like have the standardization that you get from the L1, but the ambitiousness that we see today or in the individual L2s in terms of kind of like a rate of new features, kind of ambition and scope of new features, and basically on the spectrum sit kind of in between those, like in between L1 and L2. The one caveat or the one kind of point I wanted to mention here is if we indeed go down this path, the path of the common core, and of course, by the way, like none of this like in a common core world, like just as today, right? Like every L2 or every L2 stack would then still on top have their own kind of additional features, things that aren't specific to an individual L2. This is just really about the kind of the shared base. But as such a shared base, it would require some sort of governance mechanism, right? Because it would not just be a one-time kind of list of changes, but over time kind of keep iterating. And this question of how do you kind of come to agreement on like which new features to include into this kind of set of globally supported features that needs governance. Of course, at any point, if you're part of the common core set and then a feature gets added that you really hate, you can always leave. But of course, then we're back to kind of the fragmented world. So really, kind of the governance side of things is something that would need to be figured out. Just to give you a little bit of an impression of, because I've been talking for like the entire talk now about like the ways in which the L1 kind of EVM equivalence holds the L2 ecosystem back. I just wanted to give you like some impression from my side of like topics that I see. Those are really kind of like mostly kind of things from my wish list that I've been mostly thinking about in the L1 context so far, but just examples. Like none of this would end up having to be, say, in the common core set. Some of these could just be IPs that separately are supported by the clients if any L2s want to ship them. But it's things like right, say basic repricing. Right now, even most DK rollups really feel the need to strongly follow the pricing schedule of L1, but of course it's in many ways quite mismatched if you compare it to the actual research usage. But it's not only the ZK context; it's also, for example, the relative balance between execution cost and execution and data cost, right? Where this trade-off is very different in the L2 context than in the L1 context. These kind of things. Just like a kind of like a one-time way, or like maybe even like a more general kind of mechanism that where individual L2s or chains could have their own kind of pricing table. Something that I personally think would be a great unlock for the L2 ecosystem. Of course, that depends on to what extent people would want this, but I think basically having some sort of basic two-dimensional transaction type that natively expresses both the execution within the L2 chain, but then also the L1 settlement cost, basically as a two-dimensional kind of cost vector within one transaction type. I personally think that would having something like this standardized across the L2 ecosystem. This would not replace existing transaction types, at least unless you would want to deprecate your existing transaction types. It would just be a new one to support that basically would be standardized. I've been hearing a lot from people. I don't know, maybe I have a biased sample of people I talk to, but like that really are struggling with having to basically support the different transaction formats on different L2s. So that's something that also I think could be exciting in the short term. And then things like, it's just like a topic that recently came up on the L1 side. I'm sure that would also be interesting to look into. On the L2 side, something like delayed state root computation. But really, those are more meant as examples. In the long term, there's even more examples to mention here. Like I think native account abstraction is a big one. We have an IIP. That's actually how that was a big part of like how the RollCall IIP process got going. Kind of coming to Carl and me, and specifically with this idea, and also expressing basically the need for the IP process. But as we've seen, it's one of those features where if the main client used by L2s does not implement it, then it's kind of completely infeasible to ship. Now kind of already say as just based on rollup get that might change, but most importantly, of course, it could be a very natural fit as part of the common core. Then things, transaction parallelization, meaning guaranteed one. Of course, clients have already experimented with optimistic parallelization. Statelessness, there's the different kind of the flavors. Of course, the statelessness you get from something like Workflow trees, but then also say ways in which you can manage the state size even for stateful nodes. Specific kind of state expiry, maybe in combination with state rent. We basically, out of the L1 context, we have a fully kind of functional spec, or not fully spec'd out yet, but like we have a version of state expiry that would work. And maybe there could be newer ones now, but we just decided never to ship it on L1. And then things I've been looking in the past into multidimensional pricing that would further basically just allow L2s to, or any chains really, including L1, to basically just make more efficient use of the available resources. So yeah, these are just, again, kind of to give you some examples. I think the idea would be that there would be a lot that could be done. And I assume most of the things actually to be done would actually come out of existing L2 needs and not just from kind of our side. Then one more kind of quick topic there on the vision side, and that's kind of the role of RollCall in this kind of now going forward. I called it season 2 because I just want to basically kind of like illustrate that, like, basically because of these constraints of that we have had so far, that basically there was not really a way to specifically to ship IPs other than the ones that are trivial to maintain. Basically, RollCall in the past in season 1 was pretty toothless, and so in going forward, it would both kind of retain its existing role, so kind of overall L2 coordination, and a platform for IPs, but and there's this extra one that we've been trying recently to lean more into, which is kind of like trying to be this connective tissue between L1 and L2, report a little bit from the L1 governance process, bring feedback from the L2 side back into the L1 governance process, these kind of things. But of course, now going forward, there would also be it would also be a platform for coordination across the clients that want to focus on the L2 kind of topics. If we go down the path of common core, it would also kind of like be the kind of the anchor for the governance there, and for the kind of the research process, R&D process for these kind of more advanced features to now bring into the L2 EVM. Although, just to mention this, it could be that like maybe this is a bit too much of a scope for kind of one process, for one call. So once we kind of get this into a more mature state, it might be time to kind of split that up into individual processes. Yeah, that's kind of our vision. I hope I did a kind of decent job presenting that. It really kind of like the two main kind of takeaways there are the rollup geth, the team that one will be a thing. It is a thing now. It's something you should pay attention to. And then of course the common core is something that's more ambitious, more optional, say, requires opt-in, but that we're also very excited about. Next steps concretely on those two topics. On the rollup geth side, if you are in a layer 2 that's currently using geth, you should internally kind of like decide your strategy around this. would you want to move to rollup geth? How and when? What reassurances would you first want to see? These kind of questions. You should connect with the team again. They'll briefly intro themselves in a second once I'm done, and start figuring out the kind of the migration process. And for other clients, if you are Reth, for example, I think it would be a good moment in time to start kind of like establishing some kind of ways for collaboration across these clients. And then last slide, on the Common Core side, I think the most important thing would be initially for us to just determine. We've talked with a lot of you individually in the past about this, and have had like some general kind of interest, but of course, that was all very non-committal. Now the question is, with this more concretely kind of now scoped out, is this something that actually makes sense for you? How viable is this? Basically, we obviously this is makes only sense to go forward with if the group of layer twos that are willing to join the Common Core set would basically have enough traction. And then if so, basically there's this governance to be figured out, and kind of on the research side, kind of like to the idea here would by the way not be to like necessarily have all the research on kind of new features live within this coordination process. It's really more to just have a platform where the individual researchers from the L2s can come together and talk about their individual work and perspectives. And so kind of like there are the questions of like what would be an initial scope for the Common Core. Again, the relationship between ZK and Optimistic, I kind of only touched on it a little bit throughout the talk, that the question is, does it even make sense to have a shared Common Core set there? Like how to basically handle that question. And for all of this, just one announcement there, we will have a kind of a kickoff call that's more focused on like, hey, what would be a good kind of initial scope? What are the kind of the burning topics? What to focus on there for the Common Core? And that's going to be after DEF CON, December 4th, and then the next roll call, I think, because the upcoming one will be right during DEF CON, so that will be canceled. So then the next roll call will be the week after, basically. Yeah, so that's all from my side. Again, I'm terribly sorry that there was not a single picture in the entire slides. I don't know, that's kind of more my style for presentation, but I hope it was still possible to follow. And yeah, then that would be all from my side. And I guess we could first briefly have the rollup geth team into themselves, and then we can have questions and open discussions and feedback, these kind of things. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Jorge from Alemán here. So I'll be part of the rollup geth team along with Nicola, who is also part of the Alemán core team. Yeah, with support with the rest of the team. So yeah, we expect to move forward with this project long term and actually grow the team as we go.
Awesome. Yeah, so now would be a good time to just basically open it up and get some feedback, like talk about to what extent does this make sense for the individual teams, maybe ways in which you disagree with our perspective there, how we presented it, these kind of things. I think ideally if you raise your hand and then you can. Nicola?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Just maybe a quick feedback. If you are to do the same presentation at DEF CON, make sure to include some pictures in the slides. And yeah, don't forget to submit the presentation. I'm hijacking the call for a quick reminder, but yeah, the DEF CON team is waiting for your presentation.
Yeah, that makes sense. And to be clear, that this one I really focused on the content more because it's more like a technical audience. We'll have a kind of more general kind of version of the talk of like the RollCall vision for EVM equivalents at DEF CON, and that one will be very normie friendly with a lot of pictures.
Thank you. Thank you.
I see a question in chat. vision slide, slide 18. Should I briefly, I don't know, let me first read. Some of these examples are great, but what happens if one L2 team prioritizes one feature is more valuable than co-differentiation? No, so basically, the idea here would be to really have this be the kind of only the absolute subset of full agreement, right? So basically the idea is if there's features on there that now that say on the client side you're no longer blocked and you have a client that is that's willing to basically support a new IP that you are interested in, but by all means, the idea is that if you are comfortable with going live with that feature, even if other L2s are not, and so then you basically in that sense become have some sort of subset of features or behaviors where you are kind of have different behavior from other L2s. But if you're comfortable with that and kind of like users having to be aware of that or developers, then the idea is always that you're supposed to kind of ship that and that like basically you still get the benefits of now having clients that are focused on supporting these types of features. The common core set would only ever be basically the subset of these features that L2s broadly kind of agree that they want to support. So that for these features, basically just for dev developers, for users, it is clear that all chains that are part of the set will support that feature, right? So basically, it removes that headache, but it's really just trying to extend the current situation. Like by no means is basically the idea that now you'd be more restrained in shipping features on your own. And the follow-up questions, what about the cases where we all agree, but the order is not agreed upon? Yes, so of course there's a lot to be figured out here. I think I don't think it would be on us to be too opinionated here, because clearly we don't want to make decisions here for the ecosystem. There could be many different variants of this, right? You could imagine that, say, the Common Core releases a new version once a year, once every 2 years or something. It comes with, or once every 6 months, I don't know. It comes with some expectation of what timeline L2s can kind of ship this set of features. This all would be TBD.
I think maybe if there are, I wanted to go over questions first, but maybe I can present something that I had. Not sure if I can even share my screen, but I can go over a few things that I wanted to say about the approach that we're taking for rollup get in general and how we envision the future. Is that okay? Or do we want to take a few more questions?
Yeah, no, I think that would be very valuable. So go ahead.
Okay. I will try to share my screen, although I'm not really sure if I can.
I think you should be able to.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to rejoin. Sorry, for rejoin in a moment. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so yeah, this is what I wanted to kind of cover. Ansgar already covered most of it, so I probably only wanted to go over our approach to rollup get. So yeah, just to reiterate a little bit on what Ansgar just said. Yeah, we saw this growing interest in the ecosystem in having like a common core repository where we would have basically we would serve as the base for all of the work that layer 2s have. So yeah, the idea was to create a fork of Geth that would serve this purpose, so as Oscar explained. So yeah, basically rollup Geth, rollups that decide to use rollup Geth as their base, they will be basically getting all of these features kind of for free. And then they would only have to implement their own unique features, like, for example, maybe Arbitrum will implement something like stylus, or I don't know, each layer 2 has their own thing that they implement on the rollup. That it's not necessarily something that we as a community want all layer 2s to have. So yeah, that's the idea. Long term, short term, we're currently focusing on, basically gaining a good understanding of the Geth code base at this point. So we come from core development, but mostly within the Nethermind client. I have some previous experience with Geth, but we're basically right now trying to improve a lot our understanding of the Geth code base, improve our understanding of how the different layer 2s are using Geth. So we have been looking at the code for multiple layer 2s out there, how they use Geth, how they fork it, what they modify. So what are the things that they need? And trying to identify these different challenges that rollup Geth will have to face in the future, right? At the same time, yeah, we're trying to figure out what are the EAPs, the REPs that make sense, and trying to get feedback from the community, from different layer 2 teams, to understand what are the things that we should focus on and we should put our energy, because most of these EIPs are actually not in their final form. So we're trying to prototype them, figuring out what are the things that need improvements, the things that need more work, and so on. So yeah, that's kind of the goals. Our approach right now, the things that we're doing. So we're trying to follow an approach where we are as less disruptive as possible with different layer 2s. So basically, we're doing this thing where we try to, whenever we can, we're trying to basically implement different EIPs in the way that minimizes the amount of conflicts that the layer 2 would have to solve when merging with rollup Geth, if that makes sense. So basically, whenever we want to implement an EIP, we go through the Geth code base, we figure out what is how we could try to tackle this EIP in a way that has the less amount of modifications to the core parts of the client. So maybe we create new files rather than modifying existing files, or we try to create hook functions that then we can implement in different files or implement in different modules, so that we're as less disruptive as possible. We are also, after implementing these EIPs, we right now are going through multiple of the layer 2 forks. We're creating a PR that kind of merges the layer 2 changes with the rollup Geth changes. And basically this PR will serve as a showcase of what this layer 2 would have to do if they wanted to integrate with rollup Geth today, right? So we have implementations right now in the repo for EIP 7706. And not the EIP, we shouldn't remember the name, the number, which is the S1 L1S load. And we have the implementations for these EIPs in NPR for rollup Geth, but then we also have PRs that try to merge different layer 2 forks with the branches that contain these EIPs, right? These PRs are also kind of like tested. We run the rollup code to make sure that we can still sync the rollup network, that everything works fine. But we're minimizing conflicts, so the amount of conflicts or the things that you would have to change in your code are minimal with respect to if you want to actually integrate with rollup Geth today. So it's not like you would have to just go over hundreds of files solving merge conflicts or anything like that. So that's our main focus at the moment. Yeah, so that is to say, so regarding this third point, like I said, we're trying to test everything, make sure that the rollup code still works. Although at this moment, testing is not our focus, and we will have to develop good strategies for how to go about testing for all the different layer 2s in the future, right? Yeah. So this is a diagram for how branching strategy looks like. I think this is something we're putting a lot of thought into, because we want to basically we don't want so we want to bridge this gap that exists between the Geth core team and multiple layer 2 teams. Not only the big layer 2s, but also there are smaller layer 2s and maybe don't have like such a big team. So we want to help everyone kind of like have this repository that can showcase how different implementation of different EAPs would look like, not only for rollup Geth, but also how different layer 2s could integrate with this code and how we think they should integrate with this code so that it's the least disruptive for them, right? So that we're putting a lot of thought into that, and we would appreciate your feedback with that. Yeah, so for the future, how do we see this rollup Geth and different layer 2s synchronization process? So from our perspective, this would have to be something like a governance process similar to the All-Core devs, when we reach some form of consensus on which features we actually want to merge. Like we said, we expect that in a couple months, maybe whenever we want to actually start getting rollup Geth included in layer 2s, what we plan to do at some point is we want to agree on a set of EIPs. We maybe want to agree on some kind of prioritization of these EIPs, and then we'll put up PRs for the implementation of these EIPs, PRs for how the merging of these new rollup Geth code would look like with the different layer 2s, and then we would put those PRs just on hold until there is consensus that we want to merge the different features into the main branch, and that we might even be there to help layer 2 teams integrate with the code, right? So that's the idea, right? That we will be kind of like the team that's there to help you out with anything that you need with the Geth code, with the rollup Geth code, with anything. Yeah, so like I said, sample PRs for the integration of multiple layer 2s. One can go over this. So yeah, basically just reiterating the same thing. You can go over the PRs in the layer 2s and see the changes required to implement this. So yeah, maybe from time to time, there will be things that, for example, there might be an EIP that we decide that in order to implement it, introduces a lot of changes in core parts of the client. So maybe we might be in touch with the Geth team. We might try to submit a patch upstream that somehow refactors parts of the code so that it allows us to implement the feature in a way that it's less disruptive with the code base, and allows better integrations for different layer 2s. I think this is something that the Geth team might be open to accepting PRs from time to time. That makes our lives easier. So yeah, that's part of kind of our plan, right? And yeah, so as part of this rollup Geth initiative, I guess one other important thing is that we would be basically pulling updates from Geth. So basically you would, in case you wanted to integrate with rollup Geth, you would basically change your upstream to be rollup Geth, and then we will be the ones that in a timely manner, like every few months or every couple of weeks or whatever, we will be pulling the latest upgrades from Geth. We'll be making sure that if there is a security fix, we will ship it as soon as possible. So all of this, right? So yeah, we'll kind of like Ansgar said, try to bridge the gap that exists right now between the Geth team and all of the different layer 2 teams. Yeah, and with that, yeah, what do we need from you in case you're interested in the project? Well, we'll need feedback in general. We have a repository that you can go over right now. You can take a look at the code that what we're doing. I can also get feedback from the approach that we're following. It will be very much appreciated. So yeah, and in general, we would like to hear from you. What would you see as a blocker if you wanted to make the switch tomorrow from Geth to rollup Geth? What would be a blocker for you? Why not do it? Like, what's holding you back? What are the things? Do you see that there are no gains, or maybe the gains are not enough? Those sort of things. And the most important thing I would say also is getting a list of these RAPs. I guess this is part of the governance process that we agreed that had to be put together somehow. We are, coming from the layer 1 in general. I have some experience already with layer 2s, but I'm sure that each layer 2 has a unique set of features that they would like to see implemented. And it would be very good if all of you shared what are the features, the main features that you would like to see implemented in this common core, so that we can take a look at all of them, explore them a little bit, and maybe come up with a prioritization somehow of which are the ones that should be implemented first. So yeah, I guess that's everything. So yeah, we can keep taking questions if you have any.
Thank you very much. And one thing before we go to questions, very briefly wanted to mention, because I already got the feedback privately that this was not clear. When I said in the presentation that basically I'm not representing the EF in kind of like in these general kind of thoughts. I was talking more about the broader approach here. Specifically, I think it does make sense to stress that like the rollup Geth team specifically is a collaboration between Nethermind and the EF, and so basically it comes with like a kind of longer term commitment to basically to make sure that this team is in a place to do its job. So I just wanted to stress that. So that part actually that does come with overall EF endorsement. Kev, you wanted to say something? Also, by the way, we are running up towards the end of the hour. If people have to drop off, that makes sense. I think we can otherwise run over a little bit.
Yeah, could you explain the difference between as a L2 if I wanted to use OP ref versus rollup Geth? Is it that now I'm relying on one code base in order to implement a particular feature?
So, okay, so rollup Geth is, so for example, right now, if you wanted to run on OP stack, you have basically three choices. You could use either OP ref, OP Geth, or OP Nethermind, for example, right? If we implemented rollup Geth, so rollup Geth would basically bring a common set of features that, for example, now OP Geth, rather than being a fork of Geth, would basically be a fork of rollup Geth, right? So we would implement a set of features on rollup Geth that OP Geth will basically be getting for free. These features will be available in OP Geth if you decide to switch to rollup Geth. It's not like you're using rollup Geth to launch your rollup. It's like you're using OP Geth still, but now OP Geth is based on rollup Geth and it's inheriting all of the features that are implemented in rollup Geth. Does that answer your question?
I think somewhat. I was more getting at like if there are two different L2s who have forked Geth, then they have two different implementations. Whereas now it seems like if they all rely on rollup Geth, is there one implementation that we need to make sure it doesn't have any bugs?
No, so for example, let's say that right now everyone needs account abstraction. Let's say everyone was interested in account abstraction, right? So, but account abstraction maybe is a huge implementation effort, and no one has actually had the time and the resources to implement an account abstraction on their execution clients. So what we would do is that rollup Geth might implement account abstraction in the rollup Geth, and then all of these layer 2s that are fork of Geth, they would basically start, merge the updates from rollup Geth, and now all of these different forks will still exist, but now they would have account abstraction, right? Because they inherited it from rollup Geth. Does that make sense now?
Yeah. So they're relying on rollup Geth in this case to get account abstraction in their forks.
Yes.
Okay. I haven't heard any L2s speak. Is it possible for someone from an L2 to sort of say what are your general thoughts on this at the moment? I see Proto, DC. Don't mean to call you guys out if you don't want to talk.
I'm happy to comment. It's very new. I think I want to see the outputs before committing to anything. This can go very well or maybe not as well. I do think the pattern of having a version of Geth upstream that layer 2s can take from as a way to standardize layer 2 features is powerful. The shared development process makes sense. But then we do have many more clients, many more implementations specifically. Ref, Nethermind, Aragon, all these things have to be maintained as well. And I'm a little bit concerned about enshrining Geth too much. And I'm also worried about Geth not being able to establish, or how to put it, not keeping up with the performance needs of layer 2s. And other efforts to try and provide this bleeding edge experience, like Ithaca, are in a way competing with this design. And I'm not sure if that type of competition is what we want if we are trying to standardize.
So regarding different implementations, I think this rollup Geth is coming because so the need for rollup Geth is coming because most layer 2s are started as a Geth fork, and when you wanted something implemented in all of these layer 2s, basically the easiest way would have been to have it merged upstream, but the Geth team is not like it's not one to merge things upstream that are only like relevant to layer 2s. So that's the gap that rollup Geth is coming to bridge. But the other implementations, like for example, I can speak for Nethermind. The Nethermind client would support automatically all of the features that we decide to implement in rollup Geth. So if a particular layer 2 uses Nethermind client 2 as part of their client stack, they would get the features that rollup Geth gets pretty much at the same time, because we'll make sure that everything that goes into rollup Geth goes into the Nethermind client, so that layer 2s using the Nethermind client can also keep using the Nethermind client and be compatible with all of these features. I'm not sure about Reth, for example, but I expect that, you know, if a layer 2 decides to start to use rollup Geth as an upstream, it's just now you're basically inheriting features in the same way as if you would have implemented them in OP-Geth, for example, and these other clients would be just keeping up with OP-Geth in a sense, right? The same way that they have been doing so far.
And
All right.
and just
one
to
question about, sorry, go on.
No, I just wanted to say, just to be very explicit, right? Like the idea here is not that rollup Geth would be the client for RollCall or the client for the IP process or something. It's really just to make sure that L2s that either today are in a position where they rely on Geth specifically and don't yet have a choice, don't have an option to go multi-client, or that they choose to want to have Geth as one of the supported clients, that they have a way to participate to the extent possible, kind of at least on the common core set side. But it's totally fine. For example, if one of the outcomes is that over time a different client, say Reth, I think Reth is kind of the front runner in that space, just basically has many advantages, and layer 2s just naturally choose to over time discontinue their Geth support and are exclusively based on Reth. That is totally fine. Like the client basically is here to have as large or as little of a role as it is useful for. And it is in no sense trying to basically like long term have any specific role for Geth or Geth-based code base in the L2 ecosystem. Very much just where the demand will basically lead this. And on the other point you said earlier, I just wanted to briefly say I totally agree that this can basically go well, go not so well. I think from our side, we would just very, very much appreciate any kind of feedback in the form of like, hey, this effort, both say on the rollup Geth side, but then also on the common core side, hey, this would be useful for us if it turns out this and this in this specific way, right? So basically, like anything that we can do to guide it into a direction that ends up useful for the ecosystem, we would be more than happy to do. And then just again try to find a way like that requires minimal kind of opt-in by everyone to basically just fill a useful slot. And to the extent that you always want to continue having your own features in a more kind of like individual way or something, that's totally fine. This is really just trying to basically fill some extra role that right now is just unfilled.
All right, about the Go Ethereum like client asset base, do we still maintain the execution layer specifications? What does that look like? Do new RIPs go to rollup geth first, or do they go to the execution specs first? Because I see, you know, more prototyping, more of a feedback loop of users if it goes to rollup geth, because you can test run it. But I think that then harms the multi-client idea of Ethereum too.
I agree with that. That one we would have to figure out, but I would say, I mean, I'm already expecting, like, you know, with Ithaca, I think Reth, for example, is already doing a lot of like prototype implementations of features as well. I think the healthiest thing, I mean, yes, of course, if we can have a more specs-based kind of approach there, that would also be great. I think alternatively, also, if we just basically over time have some sort of collaboration forum across the kind of the clients that are most actively kind of targeting the L2, and have coordination there on like which kind of new and advanced features they are kind of implementing and testing. That also, I think, would be useful in that context. But yeah, I think having rollup geth now have play some sort of outside role in the ecosystem, or basically some role beyond what beyond any other client, that would explicitly be a failure case here. That specifically is. I mean, it's good that you're pointing out, because I do agree that like it's easy to just forget about, but I really think that this very importantly would be a failure case.
Also, you mentioned, or I think you hinted at a way to compare which layer 2s adopt which RIPs and EIPs. This comparison type of website or something like that. Is somebody working on this? Like, where do we track this type of thing? And also, will we track the rollup geth diff in a similar way? Is that the same type of project, or like how does that come together?
So the question is whether we have like a website where you can track the different, basically the changes that we're making to rollup geth and the different branches that we say we have for the integration with layer 2s. So we don't have a web.
They adopt those changes.
Yeah, so we do not have at the moment such a website. We could put it together. Actually, I think we run I think it's Optimism that has this diff generating websites thing that we can use. And we used it locally to kind of go through the diffs of a few layer 2s. We can probably put that up without too much work. Right now, the closest that we have to that is PRs. So you can go through the diff in the PR, because we haven't merged anything. So you can basically go through the diff in a PR that implements EIP 7706, and then you can go through the diff in a PR that basically merges op-geth with the rollup geth EIP 7706 implementation. So PRs are the things that we have right now. And I think it wouldn't be too hard to put together some kind of website. We could work on that potentially.
Right.
The main thing I see go wrong is that between OP Stack and between Ethereum layer 1, there's just one diff to keep track of. But then once there are many different RIPs, and it starts to look more like a tech tree, where there's a tree of changes that might have some dependencies on one another. And then keeping track of how that all fits together and what is needed to adopt a certain change might, you know, it's something that I think needs dedicated support to do well in the long term. Compare this to ecosystems that use plugins, for example. You can browse the plugins like a marketplace. It's a lot more documented in that sense. Whereas if it's just Git diffs, it might become very messy very quick.
Yeah, I think with a lot of these questions, it's really the case where like we have to figure this out as we go. I think it's hard to set this up in advance because we just don't know yet what the demands are. But I in general totally agree. But I think this will be unavoidable if we end up ramping up kind of EVM execution side innovation overall on the L2 space. This will be a problem we'll have to face and we'll have to find solutions for. I think the alternative of basically just like the alternative, of course, would be that we just only ever have innovation in each individual like L2 stack, which also works. But I think kind of the having some sort of at least shared base would be desirable enough to warrant figuring all of this out.
DC, did you have an opinion on this? Not representing WorldCoin, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, like for us, I mean, this is like I have a very different view of this because of like more of like app-driven development. Like for us, we want to like we obviously care about the OP stack, right? Like we're part of the super chain, therefore we have to like upgrade as everybody else does in the super chain. So this is sort of like standardization effort. My personal like worries are the ones that have been voiced like in the chat as well, like all the dependency tooling, like Solidity, etc., all the downstream effects. To the effect of this, I mean, I would like to see just like some form of diff that is curated and then distributed to all the like respective tooling. I don't know, like my views of this, like I just need to think about it a bit more. I don't have anything specific just yet. But yeah, we would love to move to anything that makes the L2 EVM experience faster. I'm happy to support wherever possible.
And Nico, you still have your hand raised. I'm not sure if that's from an old question or if you want to say something else.
Yeah, that was from an old question, but yeah, actually, I think there is a lot of unanswered question, and it's good if we could have a thread on Ethereum magicians and discuss further there, because it's going to raise a lot of different topics, and yeah, maybe some of them can be even side projects like the website to track everything. But it would be great to have a follow-up dedicated topic on his map.
Yeah, that seems very reasonable.
I guess. Oh, sorry.
No.
I don't know if Roberto in here is the Roberto that I think it is. If it is, do you have an opinion on this?
Hey, Kev. Yeah. I mean, I'm very supportive of this initiative. One of the things we've been worried about on the base side is we think we're going to outgrow Geth, at which point we'll be potentially no longer multi-client, dependent entirely on Reth. So I would love to see a fork of Geth that keeps up with the performance goals that we have. I'm glad to see you're thinking about things like delayed state, Ruth. I'm also really excited about an L2 specific transaction type, which I don't ever see making it into Geth. So and I would prefer that to be in a more standardized repo rather than purely an OP stack specific extension, because obviously if you introduce a new transaction type, it needs to be supported by multiple wallets, and I don't think that would happen unless it's a standard that's accepted by not just OP stack chains, but the other prominent rollups as well. So for those reasons, I'm pretty eager to follow along. Also still thinking about this, digesting what it means, but initial impressions, pretty positive.
Thanks, Roberto.
Do we have any maybe other? It's funny now that the three people talking, they were all OP stack, which is great. But do we also have anyone from any of the other L2 ecosystems? Would be curious to basically see if those are similar concerns, or then maybe from a different perspective other concerns, or.
I think Derek from Off-Chain Labs had to drop the call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not here anymore. I was just about to ping him, but then I couldn't. He's not here
Yeah,
anymore.
same.
Yeah, I think he had some concerns, if I remember in the chat, about like how this basically could slow down new features, because now, say, there would have to be agreement on, even if there's general agreement on like which features, say, to add to the common core set, but like it could be that there's disagreement on ordering or timeline or things like that. And there I just wanted to reiterate that this is really like, this is supposed to just like fill a role that purely adds value, right? This process. So if there ever is disagreement, or an individual L2 would prefer to ship something on a faster timeline, of course, this is always a choice. The idea here is really just that like this could be a great platform for features that otherwise don't make it at all, or where basically there's a specifically high value in standardization. So if you prefer to ship any specific features on your own, absolutely, right? Like, and ideally now you have one more client that is willing to implement and support IPs that you need for that. Proto?
What is the first course of action for rollup Gav? Like, how many team members are there currently, and what feature will be implemented first?
I would say we're still on experimental phase. So what we're doing right now is, and I think that's what we wanted to focus on at least until close to end of the year. So we chose a set of EIPs just from a list of EIPs pretty much arbitrarily, and started implementing EIPs that touch different parts of the Get code base, so that we could give us some insights. Like we're trying to identify challenges, like in EIPs that, for example, touch the state transition code, or EIPs that touch the mempool code, or whatever, right? So we're trying to get a set of EIPs that implementing them would basically cover different parts of the code base, so that we would get an understanding of what are the different challenges that we would face with implementing different types of EIPs, in some sense, and also familiarize ourselves with the Get code base. And yeah, so that's the idea right now. So it's more like understanding, learning, experimenting with everything, breaking things a little bit for a couple of months before we actually get to, okay, we want to implement this EIP for real. Let's get it working. Let's test it. Let's do everything. So I guess this is the time where the best contribution from the layer 2 side would be reviewing our process. So taking a look at what we've done, giving us feedback. What do you think we could do better? What things would you like to see changed? How would you like this to look like in the future? So that maybe we can move in that direction.
Yeah, and in terms of new features, I do think that, like, say if we have the breakout call early December, that would be a good place to like specifically talk a little about, are there any specific features that maybe are low-hanging fruit that don't require like a 1 year kind of research exploration first, that L2s, many L2s are interested in, that basically could be good features for not just rollup Geth, of course, but like all clients that are willing to spend attention on the L2 side to implement and support, even before, say, we get some sort of formal common core off the ground, just to basically have these features there and available. And I think, again, it makes much more sense to actually go by what people want, what teams want, rather than to just be opinionated about which features to implement and ship. Okay, do we have anything more for the score? We're also 23 minutes over the official window. Otherwise, again, I think what would be very valuable for us in general, like I think we've now heard Proto, thank you very much. That was very useful feedback. Also from a few people in chat, from Roberto and from DC here. Any continued kind of feedback of like skepticism is probably the best. Like what are the reasons for why you might not be interested in either, like, you know, say rollup get or also some sort of common core, or participating in kind of like ever moving off of, say, the L1 as your target at all. But also maybe beyond skepticism, if you think in general this is interesting and you maybe specifically would under some specific conditions you think this would be something you want to participate in, then that's of course also very, very interesting to hear. So basically any thoughts, any uncertainties, any kind of ways in which this could work best for you all, I think we would be very interested in hearing. And yeah, there's a question, maybe Jorge, if you could
I think, yeah, I saw the question. Yeah, so I think in general, if, for example, one thing that would be super helpful at the moment, going over we have 2 PRs, so, and they're not that big. Taking a look, seeing the things, the way we implemented them, looking at, for example, if you're from the super chain, looking at the PR that tries to merge OP-Get with the features implemented in rollup get, and, you know, taking a look at seeing if you see some kind of red flags, or we wouldn't merge this because there's a change here that will break these other things for us, right? So this type of thing. And also giving us like some kind of hint of where the EAPs things, not necessarily EAPs, right? But anything that you would like to see implemented in this role of Geth. I think those 2 things would be tremendously valuable for us.
Yeah, and I mean, I think from our side, the primary thing is really just basically the feedback on primarily the common core, basically the specifically the idea of the common core. Is that something like because at some point there will have to be a decision, like at some point reasonably soon there will have to be a decision point of like, hey, this is kind of like some initial set of features that people would want to be part of the common core, and then which rollups actually want to support that those features. And so it would be nice to kind of get a feeling for under which circumstances would people be willing to participate in that. Yeah. Okay, I think then this is probably a good stopping point for now. I think we will set up some sort of discussion place as well over on ETH Magicians or something, but I think ETH Magicians is a good place. But also, of course, we have the Telegram group as well. So feel free to then continue the conversation async for now, and hopefully see many of you in person at DEF CON, and then on the breakout call on December 4th. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.